Welcome to Sustainable Packaging with Cory Connors. I am very excited for my guest today. Mr. Mathew Wright is the founder and CEO of Specright. How are you, sir?
Great to be here with you today, Cory.
I'm a huge fan of yours and I just finished reading your book. I'm very excited to talk about that. But first, I'd like you to kind of fill in the audience on your background a little bit. And I know you've been in the industry for a long time. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hopefully we don't use the word too long a time, but I've been in the industry for 20 plus years. I always kind of stop it there, but a big fan of yours too. Anybody that's in the packaging industry is near and dear to my heart. Spent to your question, spent my whole career in packaging, really out of the gate, started in New York City, and really had a chance to kind of move throughout the country in different positions, run up the ranks to executive positions in big paper companies. Also had an opportunity to manage and run my own packaging company, which we grew, I think, about 500% in 5 years. So it was quite a rocket ship journey there.
Wow.
And then when I left that opportunity, really gave me an opportunity to really put my time and energy around what we're going to talk today about, which is specification management. But I know you appreciate this in the packaging industry, a great opportunity to see all things made. I always say from chicken slaughter to missiles made. Really gave me it's been a great business just from that perspective, which I know you appreciate.
Absolutely. It's one of the coolest parts of our job in this world of packaging is we get to be a part of all different kinds of companies. And I've always enjoyed that. I agree with you.
And really the ability to move throughout the organizations into different jobs. I spent half my career kind of on the revenue side and half my career on the ops side. And that's pretty rare in most industries. You don't get those chances to see, quite the exposure we do. And so I think that's why people that are in packaging don't leave and love it.
Absolutely. And I think what we need to talk about today is your new company. So specifications. If the specs are wrong on packaging run, it will need to be redone. It could even cause a major recall, which would be a sustainability nightmare because all that packaging, all that product would have to be remade, could potentially be landfill. Hopefully it at least gets recycled, but that's best case scenario. How does Specright make a difference in that world?
Yeah, it's something that's just near and dear to my heart. Again, spending my whole career in industry and running operations, we've had this thing in industry called, allowable waste. And to me, it's kind of a crazy word to use. Even when I was running factories, I was always shocked that, is there really a right to have a benchmark of allowable waste? Shouldn't we be shooting for zero controllable waste? And to your point, that all makes it way, hopefully to some degree in recycled processes, but that still burns energy and takes effort to do that. Whereas if that didn't exist today, we wouldn't be having to figure that part of it out. And so, I think most of the stories and I've got a bunch of them, I know you do, about failures and waste really have to do with misinformation or multiple duplicated specs or multiple different parts of the data in different spots, and picking or choosing the wrong data stream that's wrong from the wrong source and making bad product. And that doesn't do any good for anyone. Customers don't want that. They need to get their product to market. It's irregardless of who pays for it. It's bad for the environment and bad for business.
Right. And there's always the tendency to point fingers at all the people involved in a situation where the specs are wrong. I have to admit, I've been involved in several of those in my career.
And probably on both sides of it, right?
So. And absolutely. But who usually takes the blame is the production side of things. And that's, it's too bad, but at the end of the day, we're working hard to eliminate that with your new company, which is
the concept. And you said, and first of all, stepping back, I always said there's amazing and great people that are making bad product. It's not that people inherently want to; it's just they have bad data. And so the concept of really raising the visibility and the value of the specification. The specification, I think, is the infancy of everything and should be treated very correctly and delicately and shared, and you shouldn't duplicate. And I think that's where we always get in trouble is, what version are you on? Did somebody have influence on it? Are they kind of holding their own little fiefdom of data that they know that's important? What's the vendor say? And so to your point, the challenge with the pointing fingers is that when everything kind of comes together is there is no one person that can say, no, this is what it should have been. We all should have been working off of this one. And therefore, to your point, kind of just historically, the vendor tends or the manufacturer tends to take the brunt of the excuse or the damage in the process. But it's that singular spec the value of the spec, making sure it's right, making sure it's a language that everybody understands and can access, and not duplicating parts of it is so critical.
Right. And finding the specifications can oftentimes be a challenge, you know.
That-
Oh, you know, I'll come in as a supplier and I'll say, well, who do I talk to? And they say, oh, you know, that's Chuck or that's Suzanne, but she just left the company. I'm not sure who has her old laptop. I don't, you know, and that's an amazing thing that a lot of people don't understand about packaging is the specs can oftentimes be in danger and of being lost on somebody's hard drive for somebody's laptop.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a client years and years ago that we had won the business and tremendous amount of business. And there was 3 sets of specs. A QA system and team had their set of specs. The purchasing group had their set of specs, and the prior vendor had their set of specs. And you probably won't be shocked that none of the 3 were the same. And you know, the other thing, and as you know and appreciate in packaging, you know, a 1/4 of an inch is a big deal, or a slightly different color is a big deal. And so it took almost a year to get those 3 specs to focus down to 1. And then today I can guarantee you, if they're not on spec management platform, that they're back to 3 or 4 different versions of information.
It's sad. It's easy to fall back into that old way of doing things, right? With
Yeah, no doubt.
different managers focusing on different things. That's not the way to do it. Well, can you tell us about TREAC and your sustainability optimization?
Yeah, I think that you know, kind of stepping back and more from, I guess, a philosophical bent on myself and the company around sustainability is the word sustainability and the visioning of it being a project-based thing is irritating to me. It's, you know, sustainability I know has historically been, you know, we've got to do something for someone, could be a consumer, a retailer, a vendor, et cetera. And in that we have to do something. And so there's a data crunch and people start scurrying around for information and trying to compile this kind of data set. And then ultimately what they do is present that data set as informational that they were able to gather. The challenge in that is typically no sooner than they present that, then that data is no longer good. And next time there's an event, they go through that same process. And so when we look at running LCAs that, you know, typically take a company 6 to 12 months, or we're trying to answer a sustainability question, maybe that the CEOs agree to or put out there publicly, the vendor and the operator at the company tend to struggle. You know, how do we get to understanding even where we're at today? And so I think just from a baseline fundamental, again, which I think the world's looking to with EPR, and I know we can talk about that later, but you've got to know what you have. You can't have 3 versions of it. You can't have kind of close information. You have to have that at your fingertips, and you have to be able to visualize that data instantly and not have event-driven sustainability, because it's the journey I hope is going to be on us for the rest of our working careers. And so why not start with a good data stream and just mature that data through time and energy? And so that's what the spec management platform is about. And then to your question, then let's use visualization tools like TREAC and others to then use that core set of data and then visualize it how we want to share that data, or how we're being asked to share the data by a retailer. And ultimately, I think the consumer is going to start asking some questions too.
Oh, very, very true. Yeah, they're the ones who were working to satisfy eventually, right? With no sales, there's no need for sustainability.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We have some research, and it sounds like a simple response, but you know, if you take all the big buckets of why people are trying to be sustainable, it all boils down to the human being wants us to be, and whether it's the customer, the retailer, the CEO, like it's humans wanting us to be more sustainable, undoubtedly for, you know, the benefit of our future. But the only way we can get there is through data and using that data to do things with it.
Right. And your software will allow a manufacturer or a packaging user, consumer, to analyze the kinds of packaging they're using now, and then compare it to more sustainable options right online, right on the software.
Yeah, and you look at, you know, and there's so many different, I know we've chatted about this before, but there's so many different opportunities. You know, how do you consolidate a bunch of items into less items, and that makes less items are a lot easier to impact change to. So, you know, something like a like item finder that scrubs and looks for things similar, bring your SKU counts down to become more manageable and able to make change is one scenario. Perhaps it's a light weighting process where you can take materials out of it. Perhaps it's a different design that may facilitate less materials being used. And then ultimately, to your point or question, if there's a replacement product, there's logic that you can build in and say, this can replace that. And this is better in this area than that area. That's just pure data. I know we like to kind of lean back upon our institutional knowledge, but at the end of the day, data makes things happen very quickly. And so, as a true example, if you found a really easily and compostable product that worked in areas of the world that allow composting or encourage, and it may not fit every product you have. It may not be water soluble or might have other elements. To be able to click a few different things, the keystrokes, and be able to look for those items. And then when you have them, be able to share those specs instantly with that new vendor and say, hey, now show me what you can displace with your new product. That's going to make it very efficient and becoming more sustainable. Today, you see all these really cool products coming out, but you're not seeing this massive traction. It's because I think they're having a hard time finding exactly what that displacement product can attack and be successful in doing.
Totally agree. What do you see as the future of sustainable packaging? Do you have a kind of product that you think is the most sustainable? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, one thing we did another research is when we've changed and kind of try to figure out where what we want to really say to the market. And we really are not going to define sustainability for companies. It's not, there's a lot of really smart people doing that. I don't think we can be very additive to there. But when a company or, a group of people determine what sustainability is in terms of disposal or less waste or different types of product, what we offer up is the data in order to make the right decisions and be successful in the goals that you're trying to reach. The other thing I think that's very paramount and important to understand is I think that's going to continue to change. As the knowledge grows and as the world changes and as products change, I think we have to be really flexible, again, having data versus opinions to be able to adjust to the new things that are going to come down the pike that we don't even know yet today. And so again, if you have an opinion today, it's probably going to be outlived in a couple of years, if not sooner, as to what the next right thing to do is for the earth.
I think that's the best answer I've had to that question. I ask it every podcast almost, and oftentimes I'll get, very specific answers. And I think what you said is true. We're not sure yet. We don't know. We're learning every day what's sustainable, what isn't sustainable. LCAs are taking place, life cycle analysis for those listening. We're uncertain, but we're learning and we're acting quickly, and having the proper specifications on file allows you to pivot fast. And I think that's part of the coolest thing about it.
And I think if you look at technology and you look at that spec that we just talked about and the value of that spec, and maybe today that product can be enhanced and improved, and so you change it to this, and then we find out something that's better, or perhaps something we didn't know about that, we can go to this. What's cool about technology is that lineage and that history is still there. And so you can say, 5 years down the road, when we continue to hopefully grow and learn about what's good for the world and what's available, we can go back to that history and say, hey, where were we? And was anything where we were right and just wrong timing? And so you can do great analysis in kind of a backwards scenario. And then as you learn more things, you can project that forward and say, here's what it would look like if we do this for the future. And the other thing we have to keep in mind is that the world is looking at this differently. Every country looks at this different. I'd arguably say in the United States, every state and county looks at this a little differently.
Unfortunately,
and so it's really hard to have a standard opinion. What I look at is filters, and so you can have a spec and then put the filter of that company, the company initiatives, the country initiatives over that and say, is this meeting, what they want to do in that part of the world or can do? And then ultimately adjust it from there and say, no, it doesn't work. And I love technology because the other side of it is you can put barriers and boundaries in there, and we have objects in there that you try to create a product and define the origin it's going to be at, and it will tell you, no, you can't put that particular product in here because it doesn't either meet your corporate goals or initiatives, or it doesn't meet that country's regulations. And that's the power of data. And that will stop, people making the wrong product, shipping it to that country, and either getting in trouble because the company gets called out on that they're not being sustainable, or that country finds them, as we know is coming, because they didn't do what the country wanted them to do. So that's data, and that's a data platform.
Very impressive. And I hear a lot of people trying new sustainable, quote unquote, options for their packaging, and oftentimes having to revert back briefly or for long term because something didn't work with the new idea. And so to be able to just go back to V4 or V3 simply is pretty cool and exciting and allows you kind of a way out, if you will.
Yeah, and if you and what's great in the relationship of data is that if you make that change and say, hey, I found something that sounds really cool. I've done some testing and trials, and we all know today, hopefully this changes, is that the outcome of reality is sometimes different than testing. And so to your point, you put product out in market and find out, hey, there's still some stuff we got to sort out or figure out. What's great is, say it's a cap or closure or label, whatever it is, you can instantly know all the products that you tried and were affected by that. And with a click, revert to the old spec while you're trying hopefully to figure out what the bugs are and still go forward in the new product down the stream. And all that data is captured. So you can say, oh yeah, last time we tried this is the failures. And you get smart, and kind of what everybody loves is AI and IQ and these things is get predictable in the outcome. And that's where, again, data is so exciting with our partnership with Ista through PackSight, our TOPS integration, our now Triac and Compass integration. This is all pushing us towards really smart data that will help us do very smart things in the future.
Yeah, the Compass feature is, frankly, it's all a game changer, but the Compass feature is the one, as a sustainable packaging guy, I'm most excited about. Can you speak to that a little bit? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's, again, we look at ours as the data set. So, I'd look at it as another filter, another way to have what I'd say, LCAs or very smart, sustainable data analytics at your fingertips at all times. And so if you look at, everybody kind of historically talked about these master data centers. And so think of Specright for your specifications as that. And all you're doing is kind of tapping into that data to kind of realize what you're trying to do from a visualization standpoint, and then obviously track and chart your course. It's a philosophical part of the company, which is if there's a great tool that's out there that is meeting a need, but needs to be empowered by, really solid data sets, which we have amazing ones today, then we're going to integrate and use APIs to share technologies. And if something doesn't exist that's really required, then we'll build it. And so in this case, we believe at this point that the Triac Compass solution is a good tool that we should integrate with, and we've seen some interest in the market from that.
Fantastic. I want to pivot a little bit and ask your opinion on recycling. Do you think recycling will catch up to the demands of the consumers?
Recycling, yeah, this is a challenging conversation because, again, recycling is very centric to the parts of the world you're in and the types of products. And you look at really difficult, challenging conversations that I think have to change some of the supply chain is, we all love or think we love the concept of glass, but glass is very low recycled because it's a heavy product, has to travel far distances. And so again, I think data will help us, be very predictable in where you should collection centers, where you might want to make new manufacturing facilities or locations based upon kind of the product draws out of that region, that country, whatever you're trying to get, the city. And now we can make those really smart decisions that are good for, recyclability through data. Right. And so my point to that is, if you're seeing, and we know where a high percentage of a type of product is being manufactured and then ultimately consumed, we also know where you should put, collection centers, recycling, returnable centers, et cetera, into place. So it's a data play. We're not quite there yet, but I can see in the years to come where there'll be so much data that will help us become better recyclers and be able to use products better through the recycling motions.
Absolutely agree. I just read your book and it was really, really good. Can you speak to this? Can you tell us, first of all, why'd you write a book? I think I know, but I'd like to hear from you, the author.
I appreciate it. Thank you for reading it. And it was a fun event. I always give credit to others. And so I'll tell you, I had, a great group helping me through the process and really helped me do that. And you'll see kind of the credits of them in the book. So thanks to the group that helped assemble this. I think it came up amongst really the encouragement that I tell all these stories constantly and the aha moment of why specification management, why this journey had to happen. And ultimately why, it was me and not necessarily me as a person, but me in this position that had seen kind of what we opened the conversation with up is all these different things that were really the same core problem. There's all these verticals were the same problem. And so a lot of encouragement to, hey, you need to write this to share it with others. I think a lot of people enjoy it because it's stories they can relate to. I think that newer people into the business get a much better perspective of where things have come from, and it's not as bad as they may think, and it's only going to get better. And I think it also harpens and talks to those that are probably kind of removed from the manufacturing world at maybe at a C-suite level, that now helps them start to understand that, no, this is a gap that we need to resolve. So great people helping to put it together, encouragement to start putting it down. And that's kind of how it works with me is, somebody has to finally stop me and say, you need to do something. And that's what we did there. And so there's another one I'm sure coming that just goes a little bit deeper into all this, but I appreciate the feedback. And any particular part of the book that you enjoyed more than others?
I the whole book was great. I appreciated the stories. I spent my first 5 years of my career working at a Weyerhaeuser facility making corrugated boxes. So your stories about manufacturing boxes and how the customer was off on the chocolate bar by a 16th, and all of a sudden when you put 6 of them tall, that turns in, so all those boxes are garbage or need to be recycled, and it was millions of boxes. And just, it's so simple to be off by a little bit, or to set the machine incorrectly, or all of these details are so critical to success of a whole project.
And I appreciate that. And nobody wants bad things to happen. The salesperson out there selling that product obviously wants good things. The client wants good things. The person that's running that machine making the box wants to make a good box. And so it really is. I think we're all in it together to do things right the first time. And again, that has to be the blueprint, the spec, the DNA of the product, and then all use the same visualization to make that happen. And so no, it was a fun book to write. I tell a quick funny story. I obviously was reading a lot of proofs of the book throughout the process. When I got my first copy, like you did, I read it front to back. I went into my team's office and said, "This is actually a good book." And they laughed, like, "Really? This is when you decide to tell us that you think it's a good book?" But I think it with help from great people, it flows the story to help it again resonate with people like yourself that's been in the business, or people that have not been around the business to appreciate it.
Well, I was impressed by your bravery to constantly reinvent yourself. That's not easy to do, to start as a salesperson like me, and then to go into management, and then to go into ownership, and then to stop everything and start a whole new kind of company. It's really impressive. Well done.
It's either impressive or crazy. We're not sure which one. So.
I think it's both. You're also holding a summit coming up soon. If you'd like to speak to the Specification Management Summit in January, can you tell us about that?
The summit is my favorite time of the year. This will be our 4th one. They were historically called user group. This is now moving to summit. And the concept of the summit, which has really been the concept from day one, is bringing everybody together. These are clients that are using the system today. These are prospective clients that might use it. These are our partners. You talked about a couple earlier, and Compass and others coming to this meeting. And obviously very rich content. We run a very fast program. I look at very short sprints of 15 to 20 minute cycles, very heavy informational of use cases, what people are doing with the system, what the gaps they're seeing in the market is. We typically have some outsiders come and talk about supply chain or around supply chain. Gartner, perhaps SAP, people like that will be at the meeting talking about what they're seeing from an industrialized perspective. And so we really look at it not as a commercial for Specright, but really that's why Summit came about, is where everybody's coming together and talk about specifications and the value of specifications. And I think you're aware of this, but we have a really big academic push we have from day one. We're in every classroom teaching packaging, basically. And so, we'll have an academic panel there that's part of our group. And so just a really good chance to learn. We've been told by several clients that this is the most enriched program they go to during the year. And so excited, this one's looking to be exciting.
And that's January 18th through the 20th at the brand new Thompson Hotel in the heart of Austin, Texas.
Yeah, we pick, it's just kind of funny. It's my mantra, which is I've spent so many events in bad hotels in the middle of nowhere. And so we've tried to make it a little bit funner. So we've done, this is our second time back to Austin. We've done Nashville, which went really well. We did that at a Thompson in Nashville, and did New Orleans last year, or I'm sorry, the year before, obviously COVID. And so we're back to Austin. Austin treated us really well. We'll have some great food at the local fair, have amazing speakers, clients, external people, plus Specright. And so I'd encourage you to join. You can go to the website, look for where you register, and certainly excited to hopefully have you and many others there with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, your team invited me and Adam Peak and Avelia Matos. I think we'll do a little panel or something to talk more about Specright. So
Great.
thank you, sir. I'd like to thank you and your company, Specright, for sponsoring this podcast, and we truly appreciate your support. Thank you, sir.
Great to spend time with you, Cory. Thank you.